Hello and welcome to today's webinar session. Thanks for joining us. My name is Sam Goodwin. I'm Head of Global Engagement at UK Study Options. And today's webinar is all about understanding UK university fee status, and especially for BNO visa holders, or in fact anyone that has a temporary visa for the UK. So it's a very complicated area, so we're going to talk you through it. Hopefully you get a really good understanding of what it means in terms of your eligibility for home fees. The presentation will be about 40 minutes in length. There will be a chance for questions at the end, so if you do have any questions, please do save those up. Pop them into the Q&A function and we'll make sure we get to cover off as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Now, before we get started, I wanted to give you an introduction into UK study options and what makes us the experts in this area. So, why should you listen to me when it comes to fee status? And perhaps why should you consider using our service to support you with your application to university? So, myself and the whole team at UK Study Options have extensive experience working in UK universities in the areas of student recruitment, student admissions, student finance, student immigration. So we have that insider knowledge of policies and processes. We are all university people. As well as that experience, we are fully trained on the fee status rules. So you can see there a logo for UKISA. UKISA are the UK Council for International Student Affairs, and they train all of the universities on how to assess fee status. So we sit alongside the universities in these training sessions. We get exactly the same training that the universities receive. And so, with our experience and with our training, we have a very strong track record of success. 99% of families that we supported in 2024 achieved a home outcome with their application. Because we are supporting hundreds of families each year with their application to university, we are in a very, really unique position where right across the UK, we can see any changes to trends, policies, processes that universities have, and we can feed that back to you, our current customers, to try and maximize your chances of getting home fees when you apply. As far as we know, we are the only independent advisors on fee status that offer a service to parents to support them with this application. You can see here some more logos of our credentials and our memberships. We are members of COBIS and FOBISIA, which are British International School Associations. We are UCAS International Advisor Network members. We are international ACAC members. We are also partnered with GEMS Education, so GEMS schools in the Middle East. But let's look at some fee status myths because there's a lot of misunderstandings and misapprehensions about home fees. So it's really important to separate the myths from the facts because otherwise it could really affect your planning and preparation for the university application, and suddenly you're unnecessarily paying much higher tuition fees. So hopefully at the end of this session, you'll be really clear on what is a myth and what is a fact when it comes to these parts of the rules. So, myth number one, you can only get home fees if you are a British citizen or you have indefinite leave to remain. Well, the good news is that this is a myth. So, if you are on a temporary visa, there is still a possibility that you could be getting home fees when you apply to university. Now, the tricky thing is that there are lots of different rules in each of the UK nations. So the rules could be different depending on which university you apply to. So it's really important to understand the rules for the universities that you want to apply to and whether or not you can get those home fees. Myth number two, if I become a British citizen, the university then must give me home fees. Well, this might not be the case. This is a myth. So if you are starting your course and in the first year of your course you become a British citizen, or perhaps you might obtain indefinite leave to remain, That may or may not allow the university to reassess your fee status. So it is possible in some circumstances that when you start your second year of university, you could then start paying the lower home fees. But it's not guaranteed because there are other requirements that you have to meet, and we're going to talk through them so you fully understand them in this presentation. Next myth, if you live in the UK for 3 years, you are guaranteed to get home fees. Now, this is not the case also. There is a part of the rules that talk about the reason for your residence in the UK. So, in many parts, this is referred to as the main purpose test. So, it might be the case that you are living in the UK for many years and still that residence in the UK does not count to get home fees at UK universities. So, especially if you are in the UK mainly for full-time education, then that could be a problem in terms of getting home fees. We'll talk that through so you can understand it more in the presentation. Our friends got home fees. We're in a similar situation to them, so we'll be fine. This is a really common one that I hear a lot. It's a really common one when people complain to me and say, this university is not giving me home fees. I don't understand it. They gave my friend home fees, or they gave my brother or my sister home fees. And this is a misapprehension and a misunderstanding of how the fee status rules work. Your case is going to be very unique because your fee status can depend on a lot of different factors, including which university you apply to, which course you apply to, whether you're applying to a university in England or in Scotland. So these things can make a difference. So just because your friend or your sibling received home fees, it doesn't mean that you are also eligible when you apply to university. So really dangerous to make any assumptions about your eligibility. And the final one, we don't have to worry about fee status until the UCAS application. Well, this is a myth I'd really like to debunk today because it's really important to think about fee status nice and early. You don't want to delay and leave it till when you're applying to university, or even worse, when the university starts asking you questions about your eligibility, because it could be too late by then. In some cases, you might have to take steps or make changes to your circumstances to make sure you're eligible. And universities are going to be checking your circumstances over that full 3 year period before the start of the university course. So ideally, you want to be looking at this 3 or 4 years before you start university. So you're in the best position to make sure you're always eligible for home fees. But let's look at the basics now when it comes to fee status at UK universities. So all publicly funded universities in the UK need to distinguish between home fee payers and overseas fee paying students on their courses. And this is because for each home student that enrolls on their course, they are able to claim public funding from the government that helps to subsidise the cost of delivering the course to those students. This means that for home students, the tuition fees are capped, currently around £9,500 per year, and this means whatever course, whatever university you apply to as a home student, you won't pay more than that capped amount. However, there is no public funding available for overseas fee-paying students, and therefore there is no cap on the tuition fees that universities will charge. So universities are going to be charging the full cost of delivering the course to those students in the form of tuition fees, and they will be much higher. We'll have a look at some examples of that. So for every application that universities receive, they are undertaking a fee status assessment. And with over 150 different universities in the UK, all of them are interpreting the rules, setting their own policies, and it could be that at some universities it might be tougher to get home fees than other universities. So which university you apply to could make a difference to your chances of getting home fees. It is also the case that your fee status can have a direct impact on the admissions process. So whether you get assessed as a home fee payer or an overseas fee payer could affect whether you even get a place on the course. And we'll look at a specific example of that later in the presentation. So universities are undertaking these fee status assessments, and they are using rules set by the UK government, and this is under the devolved arrangement. So there are different rules in each of the UK nations. So England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales each have a different set of fee status rules. The problem is that the rules are very complex. They are very generic, very difficult to apply, especially when it comes to cases where people may be moving to the UK or leaving the UK, or they may have spent a period of time living outside of the UK before they start their university course, because the rules have a lot of grey areas where universities need to make their own judgment and use their discretion. And it could be for people in these circumstances that the fee status outcome can be very unpredictable. It could also be inconsistent. So if you apply to 5 universities with your UCAS application, it could be that some of those universities may decide that you are a home fee payer and some of those universities may decide that you are an overseas fee payer. This is particularly relevant where families may be living temporarily outside of the UK for short periods before they start university. The rules refer to what is called ordinary residence. And each university is going to have their own policy on what they consider to be ordinary residence. So if you are in a situation where your ordinary residence is in question, this is where the fee status outcome can be very unpredictable. So, what happens if you don't get assessed as an overseas as a home fee paying student? Well, overseas fee paying students pay much higher tuition fees, anywhere between £36,000 and £423,000 for a UK degree. So, this is obviously a huge range, and it just reflects the fact that each university is setting their own fees for overseas fee paying students. Also, remember that overseas fee paying students are not able to access student finance. So you can't get that student loan from the government to help you with the cost of your tuition fees or your living costs while you are living in the UK. So if we look at some illustrative examples now of the difference between a home fee payer and overseas fee payer at a UK university. And this first example is doing a medicine degree at an English university. So important to consider, we are looking specifically at the rules in England here. And you can see on the left-hand side for tuition fees, a home fee payer will pay £9,535 per year. That is the capped rate. So it doesn't matter what university or what course you're applying to, whether it's sciences, arts, humanities, law, even medicine, this is what you're paying as a home fee paying student. But this is much lower than what you'll pay as an overseas fee paying student. You can see there up to £70,554 per year. Um, the up to is important because, of course, universities are setting their own fees. So there are uh, universities in England where you can study a medical degree for less than £70,000. You might find one that is charging 40 or £50,000, but the most expensive currently is at Cambridge University, where you'll be paying £70,000 per year. Just a quick tip here when applying to medical degrees, do check the duration of the course because some medical degrees can be 5 years in length. In fact, at Cambridge, it's a 6 year course, so really important to understand how many years you are going to be paying tuition fees for. But if we look at student loan, you can see that's on a different basis depending on your fee status. So home students, yes, you are able to apply for student finance to get that support with the cost of your study. I would point out here that it is not guaranteed. It is a separate assessment and a separate decision that is made by Student Finance England or the relevant student loan company. So even if you get home fees from the university, it could be that you get rejected for a loan, but if you have managed to show your eligibility for fees purposes, you'll be in a good position perhaps to argue your eligibility for loan purposes for that home status. But these are not available to overseas fee-paying students. They are limited to home students. So overseas student, you are going to think of an alternative way of funding the cost of your degree. And finally, if we look at admission, this is on a different basis as well. So again, depending on your fee status, it will be different. So for home students, it's competitive to get that place on the course. We know medical degrees are oversubscribed. It can be tough to get the offer. But immediately it's different again for overseas fee-paying students. Very competitive. And this is because for medicine, dentistry, and veterinary courses, these are known as competitive entry courses. So on these courses, the government has set a cap on the number of places that universities are allowed to offer to overseas fee-paying students. So if you're assessed as an overseas fee-paying student on one of these courses, you are competing for just 7% of places on that course. So immediately your chances of getting an offer could be much lower. The entry requirements you need to meet, the grades you need to meet to get one of these very small number of places that are reserved for overseas fee-paying students could be much higher. So this is an example where your fee status could directly impact your chances of getting an offer on the course. But if we look at another example now, a business degree at a Scottish university. So we're now in Scotland, so it's a different set of rules in Scotland. You can see that there are two levels of tuition fees under the home column. So they still have free tuition for Scottish home students. So if you are a student from Scotland and you apply to a university in Scotland, as a home student, the most you'll pay is £1,820 per year. But they also have a middle rate of fees. It's called RUK, Rest of UK. So if you're from England, Wales, or Northern Ireland and you apply to a university in Scotland, you will pay £9,535 per year, so the equivalent of home fees in England. But these fees are still much lower than what you will pay as an overseas fee-paying student, up to £32,000 per year. There are business degrees in Scotland you can study for less than that, but currently the most expensive is at St Andrews University. Another quick tip here when you're applying to a Scottish university, do check the duration of the course again. Some undergraduate degrees in Scotland can be 4 years in length rather than 3 years, so really important not to get caught out there for budgeting purposes. The student loan is on the same basis as the previous example. Home students, yes, you can apply for a student loan. It's not guaranteed, but you've got a good chance of getting that support. Overseas students, no. There's no student loan for overseas fee-paying students. And then finally, in this example, the admission is on the same basis. So in this example, it doesn't matter whether you get assessed as a home fee payer or an overseas fee paying student. In terms of your chances of getting an offer on the course, it's not too competitive. So a little bit easier perhaps than getting an offer on a medical degree, depending on which university you apply to, not too competitive. So let's look at the rules for temporary visa holders. So a temporary visa is any visa that has an end date. So if there's an end date on your leave to remain in the UK, then this is where these provisions will be applicable to you. Of course, if you have indefinite leave to remain, if you're a British citizen, then you don't have temporary status in the UK. So let's look first at the rules in Scotland. If you remember, there are different rules. So your eligibility is likely to be different in Scotland, say, compared to the other UK nations. So there is good news if you are wanting to apply to a university in Scotland because it is possible for you to get home fees if you have a temporary visa. So, since 2023, the rules in Scotland allow for anyone who has been granted leave to enter or leave to remain to be considered for the home or the RUK fees at Scottish universities. Now, importantly, the temporary visa must not have expired. So you must be lawfully here in the UK. So you can't be here unlawfully or illegally without a visa. So you must have that temporary visa status. And another very important thing to keep in mind, those who enter the UK on a study visa will remain ineligible for home or RUK fee status. So these provisions don't are not applicable to student visa holders. So if you came here to study in the UK and you needed to have a student visa, then you are not able to get home fees under these provisions or RUK fees. But you really important, you must remember that the visa status alone does not get you home fees. When we look at the rules for people to get these home fees, there's often many different requirements, and you need to make sure that you are meeting these requirements. You need to meet all the eligibility requirements in the particular category for you. Now, one very important requirement is the residency requirement. So there is a requirement for you to be ordinarily resident in the UK, and you need to show this ordinary residence for that 3-year period before the start of the course. So this is really important. So even if you have the temporary visa, that's only one part of the requirement. The other part of the requirement that you need to meet is to show that you have been ordinarily resident in the UK for the full 3-year period before the start of the academic year when you start your course. So in Scotland, the start of the academic year is the 1st of August. So let's say, as an example, you are starting your course in 2026. You would need to show that you have been ordinarily resident in the UK for the period from the 1st of August 2023 until the end of July 2026. Now, if you have been living permanently day to day in the UK, that is ordinary residence. So if you've been living in the UK for all that time, you are undoubtedly ordinarily resident in the UK. Now, if you have been living outside of the UK for any reason during that 3-year period, your eligibility in respect to your ordinary residence will be in question. It is possible for people to be ordinarily resident in the UK or a place despite living temporarily outside of the UK. So it's possible you could still be eligible, and there are specific provisions to allow for cases where you need to be outside of the UK temporarily for employment. So if your job means you need to leave the UK temporarily, it should not affect your eligibility for home fees. But that's important to keep in mind. Look closely at this ordinary residence requirement because you must have that 3 years of ordinary residence in the UK before the 1st of August in the year that you are starting your course. Now, this is assuming that you will start your course in the main intake, usually August or September or October each year. If you're starting your course at that time, the key date is the 1st of August. Let's look though at the rules elsewhere in the UK. So now we are looking at England, Wales, or Northern Ireland. They each have their own separate rules, but the rules are the same in each of these regions. So it's the same rules that you need to meet in all of these. And in these regions, there have also been even more recent changes to the rules since 2023 that could affect your eligibility. So let's look at what that means if you're on a temporary visa and you want to apply to a university in England or one of these other regions. So some key points here. The requirement that has changed now says that you must be settled on the first day of the academic year for which you are paying tuition fees. So in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, you can't get home fees if you are on a temporary visa. You do need to have made that transition to settled. Now, importantly, in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, they have a different academic year, and that starts on the 1st of September each year. So that is the critical date to keep in mind in these regions. But it does mean that even if you start your course and pay overseas fees when you start, if you become settled during your course, you can change to home fees later, and that may save you a lot of money and that may be applicable to your circumstances. But remember, again, there are other requirements. So just because you get indefinite leave to remain or you become a British citizen, say perhaps in year one or year two of your course, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to swap onto the lower home fees. Let's see what the rules say. So just because you have this settled status does not get you home fees. You need to meet the full requirements. And again, it's the same requirement. You still need to show 3 years of ordinary residence in the UK before the start of your course. So importantly, there are two different periods to keep in mind here. There is the period where you become settled. This might be after you start your course. That's one part and one tick in the box to get home fees. The other tick in the box is the ordinary residence requirement. But that ordinary residence requirement always relates to the 3 year period before the start of your course, before the first year of your course. It doesn't relate to the 3 year period before you got your indefinite leave to remain or your British nationality. So that's really important. Let's look at settled. So, what does settled mean? And you may not have a good understanding of this. So, if you're on a temporary visa currently, many of these temporary visa routes, such as the British National Overseas or BNO visas for those from Hong Kong, or the skilled worker visas. These types of visas often have a pathway to permanent residency here in the UK. So there's a pathway for you to get indefinite leave to remain, and that is a status that would mean that you are settled in the UK. So settled means both ordinarily resident and having no restriction on the length of stay in the UK. So let's look at the groups that can meet this. So if you are a British national, if you've got the British passport, you're a British citizen, you are settled. Also, the Republic of Ireland national. So if you're Irish, you also, under these special arrangements with the UK government, have no restriction on coming to and staying in the UK. You are settled. Additionally, if you have indefinite leave to remain or right of abode in the UK, you've got no restriction of how long you can stay in the UK with that status. And there's also provision for non-British citizens serving in the British Armed Forces. You are covered as well. You can be settled in the UK. Since Brexit, also there is the EU settlement scheme. So if you have settled status under the EU settlement scheme, that's indefinite leave to remain also. And just quickly to note here that if you do have status under the EU settlement scheme, but it's only pre-settled status, actually, you could get home fees with that pre-settled status. There are specific categories there. So even though that status is temporary in some ways, it's not indefinite leave to remain. For you, look into your own case because you may be able to get home fees without needing to show settled also. Just a quick note here that family members of these groups could also get home fees at university. So a spouse, a child, or grandchild. So if the child or the student themselves is not a British citizen or they don't have indefinite leave to remain, but perhaps they have a parent or a grandparent or a spouse, then they could get home fees. But if you are claiming eligibility through a family member, then the family member must be settled on the first day of the first academic year of the course. So if you all obtain eligibility together or the family member becomes eligible after you start the course, then that is not helpful. So you must have British citizenship or indefinite leave to remain on the first day of the whole course if it's a family member. But then if you become a family member after you start your course, you might be able to change your fee status. So let's say someone on a temporary visa gets married to a British citizen in the second year of their course, then if that British citizen was already a British citizen when that person started the course, they might be able to get home fees in year three of the course. This is all a bit complicated, so I've got a few case studies here that hopefully will make things a bit clearer, a bit easier to understand. So The first case study is someone on a skilled worker visa. They've been living in the UK on that visa for 4 years before they are going to start their university course in the UK. But then in the first year, so they've just started their course, and before they complete the first year, they actually obtain indefinite leave to remain in the UK. So, what does this mean for fee status? So, there's two different considerations here. We need to look at Scotland under the different rules, and then we need to look at all the other nations. So, in Scotland, they should be eligible for home fees because, importantly, they have that limited leave to remain. So they have the temporary visa and they have that 3 years of ordinary residence before the course starts. So they can get home fees immediately for the full course. Now, in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, remember that they need to have that settled status. So they need to have indefinite leave to remain. So in year one, they get indefinite leave to remain, and because they have that 3 years of ordinary residence before the start of the course, from year two, the university should consider whether they should be charged home fees. So they can swap onto home fees in year two. So year one, they'll be paying overseas fees. Year two, year three, year four, year five, however many years the course is, they can be considered for home fees. Let's look at another example. So this is now a BNO visa, British National Overseas Visa, the temporary visa. They have been living in the UK for 2 years before they start their university course, and they obtained their ILR in year three. So in year three, they get their indefinite leave to remain. So they're doing a longer course. They're doing medicine. It's a 5 year course. So in year three, they get indefinite leave to remain. So let's see what that means for their fee status. So in both cases, overseas fees. So why is this? Because they've got a visa and they get indefinite leave to remain, exactly the same as the previous example, but what's different? It's the fact of how many years they had been living in the UK before they started their course. In this example, they only had 2 years living in the UK, so probably only 2 years of ordinary residence before they start their course. This means that they cannot get home fees because this is a crucial requirement both in Scotland and in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So this student will not be able to get home fees because of that. Now, really important to remember that ordinary residence is not the same as living somewhere. So there could be grounds in certain specific circumstances where even though they've only been living in the UK for 2 years before university, perhaps even before that they had claims to say that they were still ordinarily resident in the UK. So there is a possibility, perhaps they had been previously living in the UK. They had to leave. They were out living outside of the UK for a temporary period, then came back for the last 2 years before university. If you think this might affect you or this might be your scenario, have a chat to us. We might be able to talk you through what that means. But if someone is coming to the UK for the first time on their temporary visa, like a skilled visa or a BNO visa, then they need to have 3 years of living. This ordinary residence requirement, you need to have that full 3 years living in the UK or being ordinarily resident in the UK. Couple more examples here quickly. So next example, again, we're looking at a skilled worker visa. They're living in the UK 3 years before starting university, and they get married to a British citizen in year two of the course. So what does that mean? Scotland home fees. So again, for Scotland, the only thing we need to worry about is do they have a visa status in the UK that's not a student visa? And do they meet the ordinary residence requirement, that 3 year period? Yes, they do. So for the full course, they can be getting home fees. Again, in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the 3 years of ordinary residence plus the temporary visa is not good enough to get home fees. So this person will again start their course on overseas fees. But in Year two, they become a family member. They become a relevant family member of a British national, someone who is settled. So from year three, perhaps they can be considered for home fees. If they meet all the requirements, they should be able to swap onto home fees from year three. One more example. This example is a student visa holder. They've been living in the UK for 5 years before starting university. Again, they obtain indefinite leave to remain in year two of the university course. What does this mean? This example, overseas fees in both cases. So again, uh, could be confusing because it doesn't seem that much different to some of the other scenarios we've seen. But the crucial fact here is that even though they've been living in the UK for many years, even though they've obtained settled status, they've got their indefinite leave to remain before they finish their course. The problem is the ordinary residence requirement because in this case, they are in the UK on a student visa. Now, in Scotland, you are precluded from getting home fees if you entered the UK on a study visa. In England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, there is a similar provision that says your ordinary residence does not count towards home fees if the main purpose for your residence was for full-time education. So someone in the UK on a student visa, that implies that the only reason they're in the UK is to study because they need to get a student visa. There's no other reason, so they don't have any other type of leave to be in the UK. So we could assume that the main purpose is for study, and therefore they wouldn't be eligible for home fees. They don't meet the ordinary residence requirement, which is 3 years of ordinary residence in the UK where the main purpose was not for full-time education. So hopefully that's helpful for you to see the differences between some of these cases and how they fit in. So how can you prepare for fee status? What are some top tips to make sure you're the best chance of getting home fees at UK university? So number one, consider your eligibility as early as possible. Really important to think about this early. Don't just look at this when you're applying to university because it could mean that you're starting on overseas fees. You might not have that ability to get the home fees at the start of your course or at any point of your course. So really important. Also, really important to know the rules for your categories. So, for the specific universities you are applying to, check the rules because they could be different. Remember, each one of them has different rules. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Make sure you look into it for your own applications. Be prepared to provide evidence. Universities are likely to ask you for evidence to show how you meet the requirements. So you need to have that ready. It might be around showing that you've been living in the UK for a certain amount of years. So you might need to save evidence of your residency in the UK from many years ago. Remember that you can appeal against an overseas offer. This is important to keep in mind because it's really difficult for universities to interpret all these really complex rules and apply them to everyone's individual circumstances. We could see that with those different case studies and how tricky it can be. So sometimes a university might make a mistake. They might overlook the fact that you should be eligible for home fees. They might misinterpret your circumstances. So if you get an offer and it says overseas fees, be ready to challenge them and ask the university to reconsider that because you might need to point out to them how you are eligible for home fees. So really important, yeah, check the fees that they have given you before you start your course because you don't want to, again, pay high fees when you shouldn't be needing to. And then finally, do get personalized specialist advice on your case. Don't make any assumptions based on what others have achieved. It could be different. Even, within the same family, as I mentioned before, older sibling could have a different eligibility to a younger sibling. So again, you want to make sure that you're not paying overseas fees, is much higher fees unnecessarily. You want to check where you're eligible. Of course, that's where we can help. We do have support available for families with their fee status. It's a three-step process. The first step is our fee status checker. And if you are in the UK on a temporary visa, this is a really great thing for you because you enter your details, answer a few yes or no questions, and you'll get an automatic, immediate email with a summary of your potential eligibility for home fees. So it can be really easy to understand, lots of useful links and resources. If we think you need further support with your case, we will then invite you to book in and pay for our further services. So we can give you a full appraisal, do a detailed report on your eligibility so you understand. And in some cases, we might recommend that you need ongoing support, advice, and guidance to help you with your fee status case. Now, that support is generally needed for people who are living outside of the UK at any point before they start university, because this concept of ordinary residence is really complicated and can be tricky, especially for those who are temporarily living outside of the UK. So that is where our fee status support can help. Now, if you have been living in the UK for at least 3 years before starting university, then there shouldn't be any uncertainty about your application. It should be clear from the rules whether you are eligible or not. It can be very complicated. It might take a lot of research, but there should be no question mark. The university should be able to see very clearly. So, in most cases, if you're a temporary visa holder, you've been living in the UK, then it should be black and white, and you shouldn't need ongoing support with your fee status. But of course, we offer additional services as well. So we do support those applying to UK universities, and we offer wider support than just the fee status. So if you are perhaps new to the UK, you've recently moved here, you are on a temporary visa, it might be very confusing applying to UK university. So this is where we can help and we can give you support. You can see there behind me, we've got a team of really experienced advisors that have been doing this for decades, and we can help you get those offers at the top universities. Um, We've also been working in universities. You can see there Imperial College London, Warwick, Birmingham, Westminster universities. So we have services to help those looking to apply to university. So we've got that insider knowledge again. We can offer bespoke guidance, tailored support for the student to have the best chance of getting offers at the universities they wish to go to. So all things from subject exploration, course selection, university shortlisting. If you're looking at a particular subject area like psychology or economics, engineering, and you want to know the best universities that offer those courses, or what subjects I should do at A levels to make sure I've got the best chance of getting an offer, we do all of that. And then the admission support process, personal statement writing, interview preparation, understanding how to maximize your chance of getting that offers. We do all of those things, and we can provide comprehensive support to your family for that. So if you're interested, again, please do get in touch with us. You can see here how to reach us at our inbox, hello@UK Study Options. The QR code there on the screen will take you to our fee status checker, a great place to get started if you've got questions on fee status. There's loads of useful information on our website, informative blog articles, videos, testimonials from families that we've supported previously, links to all our social media channels so you can keep updated with all our activities and any updates on the rules and university admissions as well. So I hope that the presentation was really helpful for you, and we look forward to supporting you with your journey when it comes to applying to UK universities.